We're doing the top 10 teachings of Brachos Daf Lamed, page 30. The Gemara is talking about the traveler's prayer. The Gemara outlines what the traveler's prayer is, and then it says it in singular on the bottom of 29b, and then on the top of 30a, where we're going to begin, I'll show it to you. The Gemara says the following: Lishatef inish nashe bahali tzibura. When a person is reciting the traveler's prayer as they are on a trip, they should say it in a way that they combine themselves with the community, meaning they should say it in a plural rather than singular form. Hechinema, what should one say? May it be your will, Lord our God, that you bring us in peace rather than me in peace. Now, the Gemara on, as I mentioned before, Chavtes says the following. I'll just It's again not the exact way we say it, because here it's singular. Lead me in peace. Basically, lead me in the correct way and assist me on my way in peace, everything in peace. And save me from any harmful people, dangerous people on the way. I'm actually slipping into plural because I'm used to saying it, but actually I misread it. It's not visitnenu, it's visitneni, right? It's give to me to be seen in a way of charm and grace and kindness and compassion in the eyes of those, in your eyes and in the eyes of those who see me. Baruch atah Hashem shomei tefillah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who hears our prayer. So that's the basic text of what a person would say had they been traveling and wanted to say the prayer just for themselves. But we don't do that. We say it in a plural form, as I mentioned. And could you imagine if you were on an airplane and you said, God, I want my journey to be successful, but that means, what about your concern for the rest of the flight? So that means like the flight will be terrible, but you'll survive. You're not going to, that's not a way to travel. So you have to pray for the whole plane. And even more than that, you have to pray for other planes, because we know that air traffic control, one plane going crazy affects all the other planes. So it's almost like the awareness of the interconnectivity, especially when we're traveling and we're vulnerable, that makes us pray. If you can't pray for yourself, almost it's not effective in that atmosphere. You have a lot of people make fun of people praying as if like, what about everyone else on the plane? That's, if somebody deserves something terrible, and you better not be on the plane with them. And actually, some people would specifically try to avoid certain types of people because of that. And others weren't concerned with that concern at all. But the best idea is to pray in a way that you're addressing the whole, everyone. Okay, so if we look at in the Siddur tells us the same things, and it adds a little more. It says, "V'sishach bracha b'chol ma'aseh yadeinu v'sidnenu l'chein al chesed rachamim beinecha." Okay, it says a little bit more. Send me blessings in all the work of my hands. V'sishma kol tachnunenu. Okay, so it has a little bit more. Not a whole lot more, at least not in this version. Okay. It's not, some versions have a little more. We'll get back to that, but that's the basics. So, that's the first principle of the teachings of the daf. In general, we say our prayers in the plural because the idea is that if you pray for yourself, God is judging you individually, and He sees your totality, your good and your bad and your ugly, and He sees the whole, and He scrutinizes you. However, when you pray for everyone, He's looking at everyone, so to speak. And then if there's something that's not so perfect about you, it's not as pronounced because you're not saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. So it's kind of like when you're in you're in a room with a crowd of people, you don't, if somebody doesn't raise their hand, so to speak, and say, look at me, you don't look at them, you look at the whole group, and you won't notice anything wrong with any individual person. It's very simplistic to understand things like that, meaning like what God only notices you when you pray in the singular language and not when you use the plural. It means a little bit more than that. It means that how do you look at yourself? Or you look at yourself as an island, or you look at yourself as a part of a whole, a community, part of a group of people. If you look at yourself and you are this strong individual and you think it's all about you, so then the answer is then you better be strong, you better be whole, otherwise you aren't, and you're kind of it could border on narcissism. So part of prayer is a form of transcending that kind of hard ego self, and that's the better way to understand this. Okay, so that's a little bit about number one. Let's go on to number two, which is the following. When do you say the traveler's prayer? Okay, so the Gemara continues and says, Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amos Matzel, the Gemara asks, when do we say this prayer? And Rabbi Yaakov, in the name of Rav Chisda, says, Misha'asher mahalech baderech ad kama, am Rabbi Yaakov, am Rav Chisda ad parsa. So most people understand this to mean that when you're traveling, at what point in your travel should you say it? And the answer is when you've gone a parsa, which is approximately 12 to 16,000 feet. It's a sizable journey. And it doesn't mean within the city, I'm taking a walk, I'm going to go on Riverside Park, and it's going to be a 2-mile walk or a 1.5-mile walk. I should say that that's not what it means. It means if I were to walk, let's say, and where would the definition be in New York of a traveler's prayer? I'd have to leave not only the city of New York, but probably the surrounding suburbs. And once I got out of the suburbs, and I kept driving, and there was just like kind of some empty space. So then that's how most people understand what the journey is. It means outside of the city. And since the city sprawl is still considered the city, I wouldn't say tefilat haderech on the way to Riverdale or to Westchester. I may not even say it on the way to parts of Connecticut. If I was going on a bigger trip, I was going to Vermont and going in the mountains, then I would say it as I left kind of the more populated part of the city. Good question about whether you say it on an airplane and when you say it on the airplane. So interestingly enough, Rabbi Solovichek, the Rav, felt that at a certain point that he used to take a flight every week, sometimes more than once a week, from Boston to New York. He lived in Boston. He had the Maimonides. He had the school in Boston. My cousins went to that school, and he also, of course, was the premier kind of thinker and teacher of the rabbinate in the modern Orthodox world through Yeshiva University. So he often traveled to New York on a plane from Boston, and he didn't say tefilat haderech. After a little while, he said, it's not It's not a real trip that I feel unsafe about. I feel it's like it's like a commute. The way people commute from Westchester to Midtown, he felt that at a certain point that was just a regular commute. It wasn't something that needed a traveler's prayer. Most people today that I know will say tefilas haderech anytime they get in a plane. I mean, they think a plane is kind of scary. The truth is, interestingly enough, it's scary psychologically, but there's a greater chance of getting into a car accident in a car than a plane, obviously, because a plane isn't a car. So you can't be, the only way you could get into a car accident in a plane is if you were on the ground driving around Midtown in a plane. Yeah, that's not a good idea. But it's interesting. So on the other extreme, I noticed, I was looking at the Truvos of Rabbi Avad Yosef, and again, I didn't get to the end of the Truva, so I don't know what he actually says at the conclusion, but it had to do with tefilas haderech. Not even tefilas haderech. It had to do with saying hagomel, and he was saying it's the same idea as if you travel, either the time maybe of what a parsa, that parsa, the parsa, the 12,000 to 16,000 feet, or the amount of time it would take to go that, which isn't that long. Let's say it's 20 minutes or 15 minutes. You would make a hagomel, which is a big deal. When I was a rabbi in Florida, I noticed people every time they flew to New York, they'd get an aliyah the next Shabbos when they came back, and they'd make a hagomel. I thought that was ridiculous. You just flew to New York. Some people say that, well, when you fly over water, you make hagomel. I never understood it like that, because you're not really flying over water. You're just flying in a place that they don't need to go over water. They just happen to go over water because they don't want to make too much noise, let's say, or something like that when you're going from New York to Miami. It's not really a water flight per se. So to me, I was like, it's not a big deal anymore. You don't make hagomel. They make it with a bracha and everything. So again, if you're Sephardic and you follow Avad Yosef, you might. I don't know. I'm not Sephardic. I didn't finish the tshuva, but you might even make a bracha for a lesser trip, and that's not even tefilas haderech. That's hagomel even. Anyway, so there's a variety of customs and laws when it comes to making tefilas haderech. The main shita is that when you are on a plane, you do make tefilas haderech. You make it as you're taking off, or the first minute or two or three after takeoff. You don't wait till you're mid-journey. And the reason is, in this Gemara, it was on Chavtes and Mebez, it says, you're basically taking, the prayer is not just we translate it as a traveler's prayer, and that's actually the word tefilat haderech. It's a decent translation, the prayer of the way, of the path. But it's also stated that it's a prayer to take leave of where you are. Okay? So in that sense, say it when you're leaving, not when you're already halfway to California on the plane, or to Israel. Okay. In fact, some people actually say, once you miss that point, when you leave, you really don't say it, or don't say it with God's name, because you missed that aspect of saying the traveler's prayer as you leave. Okay, so that's a little bit about it. Let's get to number 3, which is prayer. There's another prayer. It's not here. We're going to talk about it later on Samach Aleph, I believe it is. That's 60 or 61. I'm going to find it for you in a moment. Which is when you go to go in and out of a town that's presumably not your town or not a friendly town. There's a debate on whether it's a dangerous town. And what are we talking about? A dangerous town? So the point of this is that you're traveling. Yeah, I found it here. Okay. Anichlas Lekrak, when you go into this big town, So the Gemara says, Taner Rabbanan Mechnisaso Mahu Omer, what do you say when you come into this town? God, may it be your will that I enter into this city in peace. Nichlas Omer Moda Ani Lefanech. Once you enter, you've succeeded. Presumably there are like guards at the town that look at your papers, ask who you are. You don't just walk in. There's like a process. So it's the equivalent of going through today passport control. So once you get in, you say, Modani, I give acknowledgement and thanks before you, God. I've entered into this city in peace. Bikesh Latzis, now when he wants to leave. Again, the same thing. It's like when you're traveling, it's the equivalent of leaving a place and there's a border patrol or there's a passport control where they ask for your papers and then they look at you, they ask you a few questions like, what did you buy? Did you get duty free? Did you pay your duty? And so on and so forth. Is there any outstanding warrants for your arrest? So you make a prayer. A same thing that I should go out of this in peace. Yatza Omer, when you come out, you say Modani lefenecha Hashem Elokai shetotzasani mekrach zeh l'shalom kashem shetotzani l'shalom kach telechini l'shalom v'sismecheni l'shalom v'sideni l'shalom v'satzileni v'kav kol oy v'arv b'derech. It's very similar to our tefilas haderech, or at least part of it. May it be your will, Lord our God, that you take me, that I go in peace, and I be assisted in peace, and my pathway be in peace, and I be safe from any negative enemies on the way. Okay, and one opinion says that it's talking about the type of town that will kill without a judge or jury, right? The constable, there's a sheriff in town, but he just says, you look guilty, and he kills you. So, in other words, and the other opinion says, no, even if they have a judiciary system and there's laws, you still have to make the prayer because maybe you won't find a lawyer, meaning you're in the mercy of a system that's foreign to you. The point is that I never heard of a prayer like this. I never heard of if you're going into some country that's not the friendliest, you should make a special prayer when you're going in, when you get in, when you leave, when you're going out, when you leave. I learned it in Gemara. I never heard of it being done. So many of the halachic codifiers actually say that that's because the tefilas haderech, it's really the same as the tefilat haderech. Like the part of when you leave a city has some element of the same prayer, and therefore it's considered as if you've already said it. You don't have to worry about it. So that would be an interesting answer as to why we don't know about it, because we only have it through the tefilas haderech, and that way we are fulfilling our obligation. And it's interesting if somebody is going into a danger area and they want to ask a Rav Shaila, should they make this special prayer as they're going in, when they get in, when they're about to leave? That's a good shaila. For the meantime, we generally don't do that prayer. We generally are yotze with tefilas haderech. It's just very interesting. Okay, so that was number 3. Number 4 is yes, the whole thing is a journey, Aviva. Thank you. That is correct. Number 4 is we're talking about traveling, and of course comes up the issue of when you're on a plane. You see sometimes there's a minyan on a plane, in the back of the plane, and they even try to get you up if you're going on a flight to Israel, and they were back from Israel, and they want to see if you want to help with the minyan. I generally politely decline. I might have joined once or twice when I was very young. Not very young, but 18, 19 or something. But I generally, since that, the thing is, I never joined because I felt it was annoying. I just felt like it was rude to the other passengers and rude to the flight attendants, and you're not able to listen to the seatbelt things, and it blocks the passengers, and you're not allowed to do any of those things. So I just felt like it was wrong. it turns out that's how, and this is many years ago. And then, of course, after 9/11, when they're getting really strict, I really felt it was really wrong to do that and antagonize the flight crew and the passengers. But it turns out that most of the poskim actually do say that it's not this idea of having a minyan on a plane is not. It's kind of against halacha. It's not really, but it's not really halachically required. It's actually required that you don't do it. So most of the people who are doing it, you can ask them, who's your posek? Because from my understanding, the majority of the poskim feel that it's not good, or one isn't at least required and definitely not obligated to have a minyan on a plane, and maybe even they shouldn't do it. And there's a few individual minor, I think they're minor league rabbanim. They're not none of the serious poskim that I know of, that I heard of, say that you should try to have a minyan. I mean, there might be big rabbis, but not big poskim, so to speak. They might have communities of people who respect them, but they're not regarded by the general halachic world as people who are not within their particular communities would ask a shayla for. Probably similar, but not to compare it, but it might be similar to like a lot of people who are agitating now to make a minyan despite the coronavirus and all the lockdown and all this. It's not really coming from a halachic space. It's probably more of an anti-halacha place. People who actually don't respect halacha per se, but they just have a need to do something. It's almost a psychological need. I mean, one posek that I heard actually calling many of them simply amaratzim, and he's including their so-called rabbis who are agitating for this. They're not actually. It's not because of halacha. It's actually against halacha, and it's probably many people don't know the halacha. So it's kind of like competition to do what looks like it's the most religious, but it's actually not the religious. It's a fake religious impulse. I mean, who am I to judge? But based on the responsa, it looks like stuff like making a minyan on a plane, making a minyan during a lockdown in the coronavirus. These are not people who are following halacha. They're kind of people who are just following the sensation that they're the most religious. But then again, you have to remember, people like the Rambam and other people, they rail against the groups that, let's say, take the Torah literally and don't have the rabbinic understanding of it, right? Or they believe a person should rather die than break a mitzvah. Like these are terrible things. So when people get religious in an extreme way that isn't actually religious anymore, it's not even following halacha. You have to ask yourself the question: what's the value of that? So I'm not here to judge. I'm just here to ask the question. There's always a silver lining. So, for example, a lot of the communities that still fighting to have minyanim and things like that, maybe they got a lot of coronavirus, but they also get herd immunity, so that will protect them in the future. Who knows? So that might be the silver lining. I don't know. In the meantime, we know the consequences of it. But again, most of the things that you're seeing in the religious community have nothing to do with having a minyan. And it has to do with the nature of the community, meaning how many people live under one roof, big families. It's nothing to do with people having a minyan. That's 5%, 10% of it. The 90% of it is just kind of the sociological structure of that community, which unfortunately nobody wants to point out, because God forbid to give them a limud zchus, to give them a benefit of the doubt, but that really has the most to do with why in a certain very religious communities the coronavirus seems to spread quicker, because of how big the families are and things like that. It's hard to when you have 10, 8, 7, 8, 9 kids and everyone has to go somewhere for something that's an emergency even. It's and there's grandparents and great uncles and so on and so forth. It's a little harder to be able to really self-isolate the way, 2 parents and 1 kid would do, or just a single person. Okay, so enough of that. Let's go to number 4. We did a little bit, but we didn't do the standing or sitting. Do you stand on a plan? Do you sit on a plan? Let's do the Gemara on that. They didn't have planes, they had donkeys. Tana Rabbana, number 4. Haderech al chamar v'giz man tefila. Im yesh lo mishi achos es chamor yered lamata v'yispalal. If you're riding on your donkey and the time for davening came, if you have somebody who can hold onto your donkey, you should dismount and daven. V'imla, but if you don't have an extra set of hands there to hold onto your ride, Yoshev v'mikom v'yispal, sit on your mount, on your donkey, and daven. Rabbi says, what does Rabbi say? Even if you have somebody there to hold on to your animal, don't bother. Just sit in your place, v'yispal, and you could pray. Because you're on the road, your mind isn't settled. For you to get off, it's going to be even less settled. You're better off having more kavanah when you're sitting on your ride. Amar Rava v'tem Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi halachic Rabbi. Rava says the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the law is like Rabbi. It's interesting. I mean, it's a question even for, let's say you're driving the car. Do you have to pull over to say tefilas haderech? And it's a machlokas. Some people say you better that you should. Other people, I've never seen in my entire life, and I've been on many camp trips, I've never seen them pull over and say tefilas haderech. What they say is they say it while people are while the bus is moving. Now, is there somebody who follows that opinion because it says it's better to do it? There probably is. There probably is some person who does that, but I've never seen it. I mean, I haven't been in the car with that person. The people I've been in the car with, we say tefilas haderech at a certain point, at the right point that we talked about at number 3. As we're leaving the city, the more crowded area, we say it then, and we say it together often, or somebody says and everybody says amen. But I've never seen people literally pull off to the side of the road to say it. And I think the reason is because it's actually not safe often to pull off at the side of the road to say it. It's dangerous. And I think there might have been a period in halacha where the custom was when you were on a horse and it wasn't a big deal. You pulled over to the side of the road. If somebody was there, they held onto your horse, you could dismount it. But today in a car, it's just better to say it while you're driving. Again, if you don't know the Hebrew and you're literally going to endanger your life by looking for it on a phone or a prayer book, then you should then do the safe thing, and that would be to pull over, or to not say it at all, or to make sure that you learn it by heart somehow, so that you can say it while you're driving. That again, as I said, most of the time when you're on a road trip, you're not driving on your own. There's other people with you, and one person, presumably not the driver, will say it, and everybody else will listen and say amen. Okay, so that's about sitting or standing. That also relates to the plane, meaning it's bigger than just the traveler's prayer, because it's talking about prayer now. This section in the Gemara is not just talking about the traveler's prayer. It's also talking about regular prayer, but because they have in common that it's talking about on the road. So there's a question. Some people say that you should say it while you're seated, but when you get to your destination, you should daven again, not because you weren't fulfilling your obligation the first time, but you didn't do it with enough kavanah, so to speak. I would say that today nobody does that anymore, for the same reason that if you feel you didn't have enough kavanah when you daven, in the olden days, they would daven again. Today, the custom is not to, simply because so many people lack kavanah that you never, who said, it's unlikely that you would have kavanah the second time either. So the custom has become not to daven again, not when you didn't have kavanah, and also when you were traveling and you had to sit in your seat and not be able to have the regular, standing and kavanah that you would have in a shul or in the home while you're in the plane. Again, are there people who might do differently than that? There are, but I'm just reporting to you what I believe is the majority custom. Okay, that's number 4. Number 5 is connected tonight and tomorrow night, and we are celebrating Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut. We're celebrating we're commemorating the those who have fallen in all of the wars in Israel, and we're also going to be remembering we're also going to be celebrating the founding of the modern state of Israel. So I thought that this daf really speaks to that in a very powerful way. How is that? The Gemara says the following. This is a beautiful Gemara. The Gemara says, first it says somebody who's blind or can't figure out the south, north, the directions, they should intend their heart towards their Father in heaven. Then the Gemara continues and says, Haya omed b'chutz la'aretz, if the person was standing outside of Israel, Yechavenis libo k'neged Eretz Yisroel, they should intend their heart, and Tosfos points out they should face the physical, not just he says take out the word heart, because it's just Yechaven. They should find the right direction to face Eretz Yisroel. Shnemer v'hispalalu alech haderech ha'aretzim. It's a verse from Malachim. It's talking about the greatness of building the temple and so on, so forth. That they'll pray from their land towards this land. And this house. If you're already in Israel, you should face Jerusalem. They'll pray to God, as the verse says, through the way of that city, Asher B'charta, that you have chosen. If you're already standing in Jerusalem, then you face the Beis HaMikdash. At this point, it's the Temple Mount. They should daven to this, towards this house. If you're in the Beis HaMikdash, you should face the Holy of Holies, and he has a proof text for that. And then if you're already in the Holy of Holies, you should face the Kaporas. And if you're on the other side of the Kaporas, you should see yourself as if you were in front of the Kaporas. So it turns out if you were in the east, you face the west. If you're in the west, you face the east. If the north, the south, the north. So it turns out that all of Israel is intending their heart l'makom echad, to one place. And Rabbi Avina brings a pasuk for this of the Migdal David is savarech banui l'talpiot tel shekol piot ponimbo. The mountain, which is referring to the Temple Mount, is like the head on the neck that tal piot. It's the tal, like the hill, that all mouths, meaning all prayers, are intending. Basically, what you have here is just like you have this idea of the direction that people are all praying towards Israel and Jerusalem and the Beit HaMikdash and the Holy of Holies. You also have V'sechazena einen b'shuv chalitzi and brachamim. You have the various prayers that God should return His Shekhinah, His divine presence, to Zion, to Jerusalem. And Amasra Shechinato L'Tzion. We have so many prayers of rebuilding Israel, Jerusalem, and the temple that are part and parcel of what we've been yearning for in our hearts. It's interesting. One of the critiques, you have a lot of people who are anti-religious. So one of the beautiful critiques against Judaism is that, all of these wars are religious. What they mean to say is that if we didn't believe and pray for our return to Israel and to Jerusalem, we would have given up a long time ago. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Meaning if you have no hopes and no dreams, we can subjugate you and take you away from your land, and you have no hope and no dreams. But what is to blame for having a hope and a dream of being returned to your homeland? Religion. I'm like, okay, well, maybe people without religion need to hope for something also, and I don't just mean for the flying spaghetti monster, something that has a historical basis, something that has that will justify a wrong that was perpetrated in the world, and this is, if there's anything that justifies a wrong that was perpetrated in the world, it's the return to Israel, a homeland. We've been persecuted. It was our ancient homeland. We had some connection to it. We never gave up on it, so to speak. We've always been praying towards it, for it. there wasn't really a real state there. It was part of the Ottoman Empire, which dissolved. So it was the partition plan and all these variety of different plans to figure out how to give the Arabs. They weren't really Palestinians until the Palestinian nationalism is something that is usually understood to be about 100 years old, and if even that. Because the idea of Palestine, there was not a Palestinian people that we call Palestinians today, is a relatively new invention. I'm not saying there's no such thing as Palestinians. There are now, but it's a relatively new concept, and we understand it's difficult, and we want to try to create the right atmosphere where people can live and let live and live in harmony together. But we need to be accepted. We're not going to accept that we have to leave, or God forbid face destruction. We're not going to accept that. We're there to stay. And yes, is our prayers part of this? Absolutely. Even though many of the founders of secular Zionism didn't pray regularly, they must have prayed in their youth or something. So yeah, they knew about Israel from the Bible. They knew about Israel from our prayers. And that they may have seen it as part of a right that every person has to be part of a nation that has a nation state that would protect them and save them, which is one of the good things of nationalism when you have many enemies that destroy you, like was done in the Holocaust. So that's a little bit of Yom HaAtzmaut is here on this page of Talmud. Maybe a lot of Yom HaAtzmaut is right here on this page of Talmud. So just wanted to point that out. That was number 6. No, that was number 5. Okay, number 6 is the following. Number 6 is the rabbis who woke up early to daven. They woke up too early to daven. And what did they do? So the Gemara has the following story and says that the Avur the Shmuel v'Levi ki have a boy the mefik la'orcha have a mekami matzli. The father Shmuel and Levi, they were lecturers, and at certain points of the year they would get up really early to go give a lecture. But what they would do is they'd get up too early to say the Shema. The Shema you have to say. It can't be as early as dawn. It has to be when there's a little bit of light that you could see somebody from a little distance away and know who they are. So it's somewhat before sunrise, and it's not as early as dawn. So what they would do is they couldn't say the Shema because it was too early, but it was after dawn. So they would say the Shachris Amidah. And then later on they would say Shema when it came the time, either as they were traveling or at their destination that they would give the lecture at, probably on the way. Kaman ki haitana detanya hishkim latzis mevin lo shofar t'kei lulav menanea migil v'karaba v'shkiyas man kriyishma kore. There was a Tana who taught a similar teaching. If somebody has to go somewhere and it's too early to do the Shema, there are the other mitzvot, like hearing the shofar, the lulav, or the Megillah, they can do after dawn, and then when it comes the time, on the way, so to speak, they'll read the Shema. Hishkim Leisha B'Kerna B'Sfina Mispal. Let's say you're going to take a trip, you're going to go on a plane or a wagon. So you get up early, you do the Shemona Esrei, it's too early to do the Shema, and then on the journey you say the Shema. That's one way that the rabbis did it. Then there's another way. I think it's Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Benkach o benkach koreh kriya Shema mispal kadesh yismoku lo tefillah. Better that you should wait and daven later, and that way you'll read the Shema and go into the Shemona Esrei after the prayer for redemption, which is the ideal way, the real way to pray. And the Gemara says, what's the argument? One says that to be able to stand when you do the Shemona Esrei is more important, and the other one says doing the Gula L'Tefillah is more important to do it together. Okay, and then it brings another story of somebody who got up early, and they didn't get up early enough, so to speak. They didn't do the Shemona Esrei until they were in front of a group of people, and then they had to kind of like secretly do the Shema and the Shemona Esrei while they were standing because they were lecturing, and they had a Metorgaman, according to Rashi, that would go on and give them a chance to do all that, but they didn't have the opportunity to stand during Shemona Esrei. So this is a little bit relevant today. When you're trapped, when you have to get up early, do you do the davening, the Shemona Esrei first, and then say the Shema? Usually, if you know you'll be on the road later and you're not going to really have the right standing and the right kavanah, so to speak. So I think even till today, it's an open-ended question. I don't think it's so simple one way or another. Of course, I think a lot of people would just wait and try to do all of it together because that's what most people do. But again, most people may not be everyone. That's number 6. Number 7 is, do you do Musaf when you're in the privacy of your own home? And also, would you do Musaf when you're privately in your own home and there's no minyan going on? So it's actually a debate in the Talmud. So let's take a look at the Mishnah. The bottom of Lamed Amud Aleph, the Mishnah says, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Omer, ein tefilas Musaf ela b'chaver ir. You have to be in part of a group to say Musaf. Chachamim omrim b'chaver ir v'shlo b'chaver ir. The sages say it doesn't matter. You could say it with a group or on your own. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishmosh. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Kol makom sheyesh shem chaver ir yachid pater b'tefilas musafim. He says if there is a minyan, then you don't have to do Musaf on your own. If there is no minyan, like today, because there is no minyan because of the coronavirus, then you have to do Musaf on your own. The question is, why is there this debate about Musaf? What about Shachris, Mincha? There's no debate about that. You daven Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv on your own. Whether there's a minyan or there isn't a minyan, doesn't matter. You daven on your own if you're not with a minyan. The answer that most of the commentaries say is that Musaf is different. All the other tefillah, the main thing of the tefillah is, especially during the week, what you're asking for. Musaf is all about the Musaf, the extra offering. So the extra offering is looked at as more of the communal offering, which was brought through the communal funds for that Musaf, for that additional offering on Shabbos or Yom Tov, and therefore it emulates its origins. And if you're not doing it as a community, then you have no need to do it as an individual. Or perhaps if there is a community doing it, the community is fulfilling the obligation of the community, of the individual. In fact, the truth is, for all davening, there is the concept that when there is a minyan, on some level, the people who can't attend the minyan, or maybe can't even daven, who are day laborers who get up very early and work very hard early in the morning, on some level, the minyan gives them some of the kind of power of their davening goes to these people who didn't even daven, and definitely didn't daven with the minyan. But I guess Musaf, more than other tefillot, can be seen as something you might literally not even be allowed to daven, according to that opinion, on your own if there's already a minyan. So it's a subject of debate. The halacha, of course, is that we daven Musaf even on our own, even with whether there is a minyan or there isn't a minyan. But that's a debate, and that's how we rule for today. So the good news is you can daven Musaf, even though you're in the comfort of your own home, because that's the law, the way we follow today. But that leads me to another point, which is again relevant to today, where it says that Rabami and Rabasi, we learned this earlier, but it's worth reviewing again, because this is before the coronavirus hit, that we learned it the earlier time. They lived in Tveria, Rabbami and Rabasi. There were 13 synagogues there. They only prayed between the what do you call those things, like the pillars, where they would study. And many of the commentaries believed that they didn't study in a shul or a study hall. Some people think they studied in a study hall and there may have been a minyan there, but other of the Rishonim hold that they basically had a private place to study, And they liked to daven where they studied. They felt it was important to connect the power of their Torah to the power of tefilah, which then means that there is a precedent for finding a very spiritual place that speaks to you and davening in that place. Not just the Baal Shem Tov, but Rabami and Ravasi. This is the time of the Talmud. So, again, today we don't even have a choice because we can't go to Minyan. We're not allowed to go to Minyan. We're not supposed to go to Minyan. So this idea of davening in the place where you're learning takes on new potency and new power. I think that's very, again, powerful and important for our time. That was number 7. Number 8 is Rosh Chodesh. What about missing Rosh Chodesh at night? This is a very interesting one. Gemara says the following. Latanya Tavla Hiskash Rosh Chodesh Ba'arbis Ein Machzir Nosa B'nei Shiachol Omer B'Shachris. If you didn't mention the Rosh Chodesh in the evening, you don't have to repeat it because you're going to say it in the morning. This is talking about the Yalav in the evening service. B'Shachas, if you didn't say Yalav in the morning prayer, in Machzir Noso, you don't have to repeat it, although that's not the halacha today, so just wait for a second until we understand it, at least not in its simple reading. Because you can say Yalav in the Musaf. Musaf, and if you didn't say it in Musaf, you don't have to repeat it because you could say Yalav during Mincha. Didn't we say about this that it doesn't mean that you literally don't have to repeat it? That statement that you don't have to repeat it is if you're in Shul and the Chazan is going to repeat Shemon Esrei with Yalav, then by listening to the Chazan repeating Shemon Esrei and saying Yalav, that is alone enough for you, since you're going to hear it. You'll also say it again the next time, as opposed to Ma'ariv. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Ma'ariv. The question is, why don't you say Ma'ariv? Why? Of course, you should say Alav Yav Ma'ariv, but if you don't, the Gemara says, but he says, why not? The reason is because so it's on the bottom here. So the reason is because we don't sanctify the new month only during the day. Well, that would make sense if you're talking about a one-day Rosh Chodesh. But if you had a second day, let's say, Rosh Chodesh, the opposite. If a Malay is 2 days Rosh Chodesh, so that would make sense the first night, but that you wouldn't have to say because you have the second night. But b'chodesh chaser machzirin also. But when it's only a 1 day Rosh Chodesh, you should have to say it and repeat it if you didn't say it. Amar lo Rav Ashi la Meimar michli Rav. The reason has nothing to do with it where it's Malay or Chaser. Since you don't proclaim Rosh Chodesh at night, it's not whether it could or could not be Rosh Chodesh. It's not about whether it's a sveika of the day. It's rather the nature of when you proclaim it. So this is basically the shir tonight is about this thing a little bit. Number 9. What was that? Number 8. Rosh Chodesh. So it's a little bit about. I'm going to go. We're going to go a little deep here. So you had Sir Isaac Newton, right, during one of the great epidemics that engulfed Europe and England. he retreated to his family's summer estate, his country estate, to hide from the plague. According to things that I've read, apparently there were a couple things that he thought deeply, and when he came out of there, he had the equation for for what we call gravity. So a couple things that impressed upon him to understand gravity was one had to do with him, looking at the fireplace, and the fire is somebody had popped into his mind when he was looking at the fireplace. And another thing was that he had a very keen interest in Judaism, particularly in Kabbalah, probably because of alchemy and things like Sefer Yetzirah, stuff like that, but who knows. But one of the things he understood is that you have the things we were talking about today, the Beit HaMikdash, the Chodesh HaKodashim, the Beit HaMikdash, Yerushalayim, Eretz Yisroel. You have this idea of this inner sanctum, the Holy of Holies. And then you have this outer sanctum, and then you have this holy city of Jerusalem, and then you have the Holy Land. So he understood that there was this concept of this power of this kind of thing drawing things towards it. And that in part inspired him to understand this idea of gravity. So in a sense, there's a relationship between Newtonian physics and the holy city of Jerusalem, the direction, the attraction and direction of our yearning and of our hearts to Jerusalem inspired a little bit Newton's theory of gravity. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, cool. Let's go a little deeper. Okay. We flash forward to just over 100 years ago. Albert Einstein trying to come up with this idea of a theory of relativity. He's trying to understand kind of the time-space relationship and the bending of space and time. What is Rosh Chodesh? So there's two ways of looking at Rosh Chodesh. One is it's Newtonian physics, right? I mean, it's basic physics. It's predictable. It's calculatable, and it's a way of measuring time, right? Through the lunar calendar that's readjusted to the solar calendar, the way we do that. We have the Chodesh Aviv, so to speak, that the Nisan should be in the spring, and that's our clock. Our clock and our Beit HaMikdash are connected. They're connected because we sanctify time through the calendar, which is a form of physics, in the place of the Makom HaMikdash, in the place of the sanctuary. And what is Rosh Chodesh? The Rabbi Solovichek explains, as I'm going to equate Rabbi Solovichek and Newtonian physics, that this is a beautiful. Let me show you something. Let me show you something really beautiful here. Okay. In Rishimos Shiurim from Rabbi Solovichek, he explains the following. In trying to understand this Gemara, he has a series of questions. And to do that, what he does is he visits the Gemara in Erechim, which is one of the source Gemaras for when we say Hallel, and contrast that Gemara about when we say Hallel with another Gemara in Shabbos. Those who are learning Daf Yomi, we learned it recently, that talks about when we say Ya'al V'Yavo in Brachos Hamazon on Rosh Chodesh. So again, he compares it and contrasts it and asks some really strong questions. And it's kind of like a pilpul in the sense that he asks a bunch of questions and then he comes up with this big theory to come up with the answer. It's just delightful. So I'm not going to take you through the questions. There's not enough time. But I'm going to take you to the answer. The answer is that there's a concept of a chalos of kedusha, of sanctity taking effect on a day without the day having to be a day that's intrinsically asur b'melacha, forbidden to do labor on. There are other elements of it. And that's what Chol HaMoed is. It's part of the Kedusha of Yantif. There's 4 elements on Yantif, right? There's not doing malacha, not doing forbidden labor. There's the Kedusha of the positivity of the sanctity of that particular Yantif. Then there's perhaps the in a general sense that it is Yantif, and then a third is the particular mitzvot of that individual Yantif, like on Sukkot, it's a Sukkah Lulav and Esrog. On Pesach, it's the Matzah and the Maror and the Vigada de Levincha, right? So that's the third. I'll find the fourth in a second. But the point is that the carbon. The fourth is the carbon. The Musaf of the carbon, actually. So he actually says Isser Malacha is one, the not being able to do the forbidden labor. The carbon Musaf, the additional offering. The Karbanon HaRegel, the just general sense of the holiday offerings. And fourth is the Mitzvah HaRegel of Simcha. I was reading a little bit differently, or I forgot it and I read a few things differently. But that's the point. The point is that even if you take out some of the Isser Malacha, you still have the Kedushas Hayom on Chol HaMoed. You still have the sanctity of the day. And that's why you would say Hallel. Because of the Karbanot, for example. That's why there's a big difference between the Chol HaMoed Pesach and Chol HaMoed Sukkos. Is Chol HaMoed Sukkos, you have special Karbanot are different on each day. So you have a requirement to say the full Hallel as opposed to Pesach, when there's not a difference in the Karbanot every day of the days of Pesach, so it's just the beginning of Pesach that requires the full Hallel. But you still have some form of Hallel, and you still obviously have some form of Ya'al V'Yavo, Now, what about Rosh Chodesh? So, Rabbi Solovichek suggests that Rosh Chodesh has a chiyuv to say Hallel in the Beis Hamikdash, maybe even Midoraisa, and he has a deduction from something the Ramban says to show this idea that perhaps you could say in the place that you brought the Musaf offering, that Hallel would be required. Okay, let me translate that into physics. I don't know much about physics, but I'll give it a shot. So the center of gravity of Rosh Chodesh, of time, is the place where you bring the carbon to signify the new month, and that's the Beis Hamikdash. That's the place that's designated for it. What do the rest of us do on Rosh Chodesh? Especially after the temple is already gone, we commemorate the idea of sanctifying time and space through our prayers. And that's really what this is. But since we don't have that ability to do it at night, if we miss Ya'al V'Yavo at night, we don't have to repeat it, the Shemona Esrei. But if we missed it during the day, then we have to repeat it, or at least listen to the Chazan saying it. That's Newtonian physics. What is Einstein saying? that there's a bend, there's a warp in the space continuum. It's affected. Gravity affects the empty space. It's not really totally empty. The so-called vacuum has something in it. And that's, I don't know, dark matter? I don't know what it turned out to be, or whatever it is that's holding it together. And that's the stuff that bends and warps and changes the so-called consistent speed of time, of light. It's still the same speed, but it's going in has a different length to travel based on the bending of space. Okay, I'm not a physics major. I don't know anything about this, so feel free to correct me in the comment section. What does this have to do with Rosh Chodesh, according to Reb Tzadok? So Reb Tzadok likes to bring the story. It's also Reb Solovichek also brings it, a different analysis of Rav. It's a Gemara in Tainis Chav Chesam at Beis. It says the following: Rav Ikla leBavel. Rav visited Bavel and he saw that they were reading Hallel on Rosh Chodesh, and he wanted to interrupt them. He thought they were making a mistake. Apparently, they didn't do Rosh Chodesh. You didn't say Hallel originally on, and since he saw them skipping certain sections, he said, I understand. It's minhag avosayim biyadayim. It's a custom of their forefathers. Okay, and then there's a question about an individual person. Should he start? If he starts, he should finish. And there's a whole question. Tosas says, how come there's a machlokas between the Ashkenazim and the Sephardim about the bracha? Ashkenazim are very into the bracha, Sephardim not so much, because it's a minhag. The whole thing to say Hallel, or what we call half Hallel on Rosh Chodesh, is a minhag. Comes Reb Tzadok and asks a few questions. Reb Tzadok asks, why are they saying? So Rav is coming from Eretz Yisroel. Why are they saying Hallel in Bavel but not in Eretz Yisroel? So classic Reb Tzadok is very in the derech of Ishbitz. He understands it on some level psychologically, some level perhaps in quantum physics. He says, again, I'm the one, blame the quantum physics on me. So Reb Tzadok, I don't know. He didn't directly talk about it, or even necessarily indirectly talk about quantum physics here. But you'll hear what I say in the name of Reb Tzadok, and then I'll let you decide whether or not it has anything to do with quantum physics and Einstein. So Reb Tzadok says the following. The people in Bavel missed the connection to Eretz Yisroel more than the people in Eretz Yisroel, because we know that distance makes the heart grow fonder. It's a form of the attraction, so to speak. They were attracted to the Beis Hamikdash, or the lack of the Beis Hamikdash, and wanting it to be rebuilt. Now, what's going to happen when the Beis Hamikdash is going to be rebuilt? Reb Tzadok disagrees with Rabbi Solovichek. He believes that they never said Hallel as a thing in the Beis Hamikdash per se, even on Rosh Chodesh. Mitzad Chiyuv, they might have said Shir. They might have sang songs. They sang songs every day or every holiday. That's true, but it wasn't Hallel per se. Why not? Because we only say Hallel when there's a miracle. A holiday, Pesach, Sukkot, Hanukkah, those are all miracles. Rosh Chodesh wasn't a miracle. It's just the passage of time. It wasn't a miracle. But it will be a miracle. When the Beis Hamikdash is rebuilt, then time itself will be shown to be a miracle. What is that? That's Einstein. Time and space are the greatest miracle. It's not just a clockwork. It's not just mechanical like the Newtonian physics. there's so much more than meets the eye. That being the case, time itself became celebrated in Bavel in anticipation of the moment that time becomes recognized as a miracle. Even before the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, even before the mystery of time is shown to be something that's worthy of a full Hallel, they already in anticipation could feel it coming. And they already began to say some form of Hallel. That's Reb Tzadok. So that to me means that there is some element, some of the mystery of the unfolding of the secrets of time that Einstein uncovered, that we started celebrating on Rosh Chodesh specifically because we were outside of the so-called center of gravity, outside Eretz Yisroel, outside the Beit HaMikdash, outside the Kodesh HaKodashim. And that very distance created a new awareness. And that awareness is the unfolding, so to speak, of the miracle of time and space. And that's a new way of understanding this Gemara. Okay, that was number 8. Number 9 is the Gemara says sometimes you have to repeat the Shemona Esrei. I mentioned before, if somebody, let's say, didn't have any kavanah, they have to repeat the Shemona Esrei. We don't do it today, but they used to do it back then. Or if you, let's say, forgot Yalav Yavo, you do have to repeat the Shemona Esrei, right? So the custom is to wait a little bit, a few seconds between the ending of the first Shemona Esrei and the beginning of the new Shemona Esrei. And the Gemara says, well, how long do you wait? And the Gemara says the following. Rav Huna, Rav Chissa, Chad Amar Kadesh Tichonen Daite Alav, Chad Amar Shitischolo Daite Alav. They're both expressions. We don't understand what they mean per se. They have to do with, let's see what the Gemara says. Why? Manda Amar Shitichonen Daite Alav Dechsiv Eschanan El Hashem. What is this chonen? Like at chonen la'adam das, you grant per people Chen, like grace, right, to grant them a certain level of intuition or understanding or knowledge, deep knowledge. But where does that come from? It comes from this idea of Eschanan El Hashem. Moses, when he wants to have the divine decree of not being able to enter into the land be rescinded, and he wants to be able to go into Eretz Yisroel, he davens with a particular language. We have lots of words that mean, it's not like prayer this, prayer that, prayer that. That's like one word. We have such a rich vocabulary of things that all have different elements of what we so-called in the West call prayer. Maybe it's worth learning Brachos just for that, so we could stop calling it prayer and give it the proper name. Many names, because there's many elements here. So ve'eschanan is when you say beseech, which, what does that mean to beseech? I don't know, I have no idea. It says, give me something that I don't deserve. Matanas chinam, a gift, not because I did a service and I require remuneration, but I'm undeserving, but I'm asking you that you give me something. Okay, that's Veschanan. So there's a certain amount of what we call grace in it. This is a gift. The other thing, Vayechal Moshe. Vayechal Moshe is also coming when Moses is seeking forgiveness of God and asking God to see his face after the sin of the golden calf and the sin of the spies and all these different I think that one was after the golden calf, right? But Yichal Moshe, he entreated. What does that mean? He entreated again. I don't know what the word entreated means, but the commentaries explain that he, so to speak, held on to God. He wouldn't let go. He prayed again and again. So, like with a certain power to his prayer, supercharged prayer. So what that means is that they're both kind of like, when we're coming to pray, Rav Solovichek talks about this, the Meshilach, in his own way, they each talk about the differences here. In one sense, you're praying with knowing that you don't have any rights. And with that in mind, you come to prayer. It's not based on what you deserve or what you should get. You're just saying, I'm just here to receive whatever it is you are going to grant me. And that's a very powerful thing. Because again, it's about removing yourself from the equation. There's no self there. Selfless act. That's one way of praying. It's for Chen. When you put yourself aside, then you could be the conduit for Hashem's Chen, for Hashem's grace, so to speak, and kindness. A gift for nothing. The other is that you believe that prayer has the potential, because God told us, come to me and pray to me, and there's, I'm going to listen. That doesn't mean that God is going to fulfill our requests. It means that God will listen to our prayers. And with that in mind, we come with a strong sense of, I'm going to pray. Again, there is a concept of not praying too hard, in the sense that people who have a very concrete understanding that I prayed and therefore I deserve what I prayed for, and if I don't get it, I have what to be angry about, and it's not necessarily a sophisticated level of prayer. It could be like, you want to have a certain dress or a certain car, and if you don't get it, you're just going to be like angry at God, so to speak. I'm not talking about that, because that, the Gemara says, is not good. But sometimes for something good, you have to have real strong koyach. And those are two modalities in prayer that the Gemara and these different Amoraim are expressing. And last but not least, maybe one of the most important things on the blot is the Gemara said, number 10, about davening with Koved Rosh. Koved Rosh means certain seriousness. I think Gemara has a lot to say about the kind of way we approach prayer. Einon l'spal elmatel Koved Rosh. Chasidim harishonim hayishom sha'achas u'mispalim k'dei sheyichavnu livim lavim shub'shamayim. You should only pray with a certain seriousness. The early Hasidim would spend an hour in preparation in order to have the proper intention when they daven. The Gemara brings different psukim, different verses, to tell us about the nature and the proof texts to show that we have to be serious as we enter into davening. And at some point it's going to say, you need to enter with both simcha, with joy, and with seriousness. Meaning the simcha is lightness, and the seriousness is the counterbalance, so that it's not frivolous. You don't want it to be depressed, and you don't want it to be a joke. So it has to be joy and serious, or the way the Gemara says it, trepidation and gladness at the same time. So we understand that there's the part of davening is you're entering into this place of fear. Another part of davening is you're entering into this place of passion and joyfulness. So there's different ways of doing that, and the Gemara will spend a lot of time on Daf Lamed Aleph exploring those ways. Hope you can tune in for that to continue on this.